Alright, so the biologist I chose to research is named Dr. Leela Hazzah. This biologist grew up in Egypt, where lions had pretty much gone extinct by the time she was there, but, her parents often had told her stories about them and how powerful these creatures were, and so these stories are what fascinated her into going into the area of study she is in now. She later moved to the U.S. and earned her biology degree from Denison University, and then she chose to advance in her education by earning her master's and PhD at the University of Madison, Wisconsin. At around the same time, she started researching in Kenya, where she saw firsthand how serious problems were between the residents that lived there and the lions. And so that experience pushed her to dig deeper into why people killed the lions and what reason went behind it. And so that related into her conservation work, and she tried to figure out what would work both for humans and the wildlife there. And that research eventually led her to start the program called the Lion Guardians, which turned former lion hunters into lion protectors instead. And so that just brought her story full circle from, those bedtime tales she was told as a child to what real-world conservation work looked like. But aside from her work in conservation, she's also a former soccer player, which just really brings out her Egyptian roots since soccer is highly popular in the country. And she's talked about how much she loved playing the game several times in the U.S., and it just shows her competitive spirit as well. To understand her area of study a little bit better, I'll start off by saying that Dr. Hazzah is a conservation biologist, and her main focus is on the relationship between human communities and the wildlife located there. She also just takes a particular interest in the lions located in East Africa, and again, this is due to her childhood and growing up hearing about them so often. According to Wings World Quest, she integrates social science and community engagement to develop sustainable conservation solutions. Additionally, her research investigates why lions are killed in the Maasai community particularly, and she explores ways to adapt traditional warrior values, which are just values that are seen as very honorable towards male figures, which include tracking skills and bravery, and she applies those towards lion protection instead of hunting as it traditionally was. Another area that I'd like to point out is that she examines whether community-led programs can successfully reduce lion deaths and promote population recovery instead. I had chosen Dr. Leela Hazzah as my biologist of interest because me and her share a connection through our Egyptian heritage. Coming from a background like this means going against a lot of stereotypes as a female, who are generally seen as incompetent compared to male figures in a similar field. So not only that, but her work is something that is just not very recognized as important by the typical Egyptian standard, and yet her studies have flourished beyond anything that could have been possibly imagined, and it just shows how far she has come in her studies. Her commitment to protecting wildlife by means of understanding and rationale with people is just very admirable, especially because these people are coming from different cultures and backgrounds where she's just not as familiar with, which is just truly inspiring. Challenges that Dr. Hazzah encountered during her childhood, but I was able to find challenges related to her field of research. And one of them being was that in the Maasai culture, killing lions is considered a rite of passage for young men, and where they would earn honor and status by killing a lion. And so this cultural value made it very difficult for traditional conservation approaches to be implemented. And so to address this, she created the Lion Guardians program, and it employed Maasai warriors to protect lions instead of killing them, so it gave young men a new source of pride and status, while also preserving their cultural identity. Another challenge was that she was a foreigner, and she faced a lot of skepticism from the Maasai community, who had seen other wildlife organizations fail to include them in jobs, despite the fact that they had a lot of knowledge of the land that they were on. And so she overcame this by living within the community, and she listened to each person without a single ounce of judgment, and she built trust over time. In Dr. Hazzah's primary literature piece, she found that attitudes towards lions were the strongest predictor, with warriors having much more positive views of lions, being much less likely to kill them, and traditional customs also played a role, as those deeply engaged in cultural traditions were somewhat less likely to kill lions. So the study overall showed that changing people's attitudes, like let's say through education or community involvement, for example, may have been one of the most effective ways to reduce illegal lion killing, and it just emphasized that conservation efforts should not only focus on protecting lions biologically, but also on understanding and influencing human behavior as well. Table 1 of the study explored what specific factors went along with whether a Maasai warrior killed a lion or not, and so the researchers wanted to go beyond just observing the fact that lions were being killed, because they also wanted to understand the reason behind it. And so 22 statements were created, each falling under 3 different categories, and were used to interview 123 Maasai warriors, 61 who had killed the lions and 62 who hadn't, and then the responses were then analyzed by factor analysis and logistic regression. The researchers made sure that their comparisons were fair by choosing non-killers who were very similar to the killers, and they were around the same age, they lived in the same communities, and even had similar educational levels. And to ensure even more accuracy, the same interviewer was given to each individual person, and so it was accompanied with additional translations to make sure everything was okay. And so the results indicated that 73% of the variation in actual lion killing behavior could be explained by attitudes, while the traditional customs explained only about 30%. This overall meant that the warriors who held more positive attitudes towards the lions were much less likely to engage in lion killing. Based on her research, Dr. Hazzah has emphasized several times that she would like to expand on her research by documenting personal stories and narratives of the hunts so that these stories can reveal the deeper factors behind each behavior. Thank you for listening to my presentation on Dr. Leela Hazzah's biography and her interest in conservation efforts.